So you've got your Tracey board, you've got your buttons and your wax. Now all you need is to understand the rules. So you read and you read and you read. You read some more, then you reread, and next thing you know, you are saying to yourself,
"Holy crap, how long have I been here? Man, I should have just watched that video."
Yeah, you should have.
A player or team's initial order of play, color of discs, and seating position shall be determined by chance or by the organizers of a club or tournament. So basically, if you show up at a club or a tournament, you've never been there before, you don't need to worry about it. Someone will guide you to what you need to do for where you sit and order of play. As far as playing at home, I'll tell you how we decide. We look at each other and say, "You want to go first? You want me to go first?" And yeah, we just pick our favorite color and play. Make sure you stick around for the bloopers. A round shall proceed as follows. Each player in turn, proceeding clockwise around the board, shall attempt to make a valid shot. We'll go more on depth in that in just a minute. After each turn, any 20 sunk shall be removed and placed in a designated area visible to all players.
That's not visible. Now the rest.
And must remain there until the end of the round. At the end of the round, the score on the board shall be counted with the 20s before any discs may be moved. That's just a courtesy thing. At the end of the round, you make sure both you and your opponent are in agreement as to whether one of you won or it was a tie or what the situation is before you start pulling buttons off the board. The player or team with the higher score shall receive 2 points, and if the round is tied, each player or team shall receive 1 point. The game shall consist of 4 rounds. The number of games in a match shall be determined by each separate tournament rules. Here is the official NCAA definition of a valid shot. If any opposing discs are in play, at least one of the shooter's discs must strike an opposing disc either directly or by bumping one of his or her discs already in play into an opposing disc. So if there are any, if I'm shooting green, if there are any blue on the board, I have to make contact with at least one of those. And it does not matter if I do it directly or if I hit one of my own already in play into that disc. When I shoot, a green button at some point has to make contact with a blue button. Does not matter how it happens, but contact must be made in order for it to be a valid shot. The no hiding rule.
That's not what he means.
This comes into play when there are no opposing buttons on the board, either for the opening shot of the round or at some point when the board becomes completely clear. If there are no opposing discs in play, then the shooting disc, or at least one disc struck during the shot, must end up touching or within the 15 line. A 20 is considered to be within the 15 line. So what that means is it doesn't have to be completely inside, it has to be at least touching. After I shoot, it has to be touching or anywhere. It needs to be touching or within that 15 line. Now the second part of that where it says that something touched during, so there's no blue buttons on the board. So there's no blue buttons on the board. It's my shot is green. I've got a whole video teaching you how to do a shot called the bump and run. So what happens during a bump and run is you bump your own button up into the 20. But let's say you do that and you mess up and you come up a little bit light. Oops, let's try that again. My blooper of not making the mistake. All right, so you bump that and it doesn't go in. In this case, both of those buttons come off. Or, let's say you do this, you blow it right on through. So it went into the 15 but come back out. Neither of the buttons of mine that I touched ended up within the 15. Both of these will come off. Even if one is within here, if it's already in the 15 and somehow I make a horde shot like that and both end up outside, then they would both come off. Not a valid shot. At least one needs to end up within the 15. Now here's a rule that can make a huge difference in any round of crokinole. If on any turn a valid shot is not made, then the shooting disc and all other discs that were struck, including any 20s made, shall be removed, considered out of play, and shall not score. What that means, like let's say there's a blue button on and I'm shooting green. If I do this and bump my green one into the center, it doesn't matter. It's not valid because I did not touch a blue button. My shooter and any of mine that I came in contact with are taken off the board. Doesn't matter the situation, if there's a blue one on and I do not hit it, then my green shooter as well as any green buttons that I contacted are in the gutter and do not count. Opponents shall sit on opposite sides of the board from each other and have different color of discs. Players shall each begin with 8 discs and shall alternate turns. In each of the rounds in a game, players shall alternate starting. So if you and I play, I will start round 1 and 3 and you will start rounds 2 and 4, or vice versa. But we will take turns. Of the 4 rounds, we will each start 2 rounds. In each of the games in a multi-game match between 2 players, players shall alternate starting each game. A singles player is not allowed to be coached during play.
Drive that out there and drift 20.
No coaching.
So in an NCAA tournament, we get to a semifinal or any match in the tournament for that matter, no player is allowed to be coached. So even if it's one of my kids playing, I am not allowed to tell them what to do. Now when we play at home, we absolutely coach each other, and that's how we learn better and stronger strategy. But in NCAA play, no coaching allowed. Partners shall sit on opposite sides of the board and play with the same color of discs, which shall be a different color from the color of their opponent's discs. If a team is chosen to play first, the partners may decide which of them shall start. Players each begin with 6 discs. That means that a team will have a total of 12 discs, 6 to each partner. And let's say we're at the Worlds and my partner and I are sitting across from each other and we have the red buttons and the officials determine that red starts, then my partner and I can have a quick chat and say, do you want to start or should I start? It's up to us to choose who actually starts that round. In each subsequent round in the game, the obligation to start shall move 1 player clockwise around the board. In each of the games in a multi-game match between 2 teams, the teams shall alternate starting. So as the play moves clockwise around the table, there's 4 rounds in a typical NCAA match. Each player will have the opportunity or the obligation to start a round for a total of 4 rounds. A doubles player may only be coached by his or her partner during play. So just like I said in singles, if one of my kids is doing really well in a tournament or a close friend and they're playing in a final or a semifinal and I'm watching that match, I can't say a word.
I said no coaching.
I have to keep quiet. The only person that can coach in a doubles match is the partner. They're allowed to discuss and deliberate any shot they want during the match as long as they're being respectful of the time limits in a timed match. This is the section of the rules that explains how the scoring works. If you're the type of person that would rather read and look at visuals, we actually have a blog post up on our website. I'll put a link in the description box below if you'd like to look at more specific examples of how scores count at the end of a round. But these are the official rules as they're written in the NCAA. The center hole shall count as 20, the region around it 15, the next region just outside of the pegs is 10, and the outer region is 5. A disc shall score the lowest value of any region on the board that it is touching. Now what that means is that if it's clearly touching the 5 and the 10, it will count as a 5. If it's clearly touching the 10 and the 15, it will count as a 10. So it counts as the lower region if it's touching 2 regions. More on that in a minute. In order to score a 20, a disc must be completely in the center hole and lying flat.
Is that a 20?
No!
It's in the hole.
If it is not lying flat in the bottom, it is not a 10, it's not a 20, so it doesn't get removed and set off to the side. It actually counts as a 15. So if it's sitting here as what we call a leaner, if it's the end of the round, it counts as a 15. If it is during play, then play continues with that leaner in play, so your opponent can knock it out. If a disc is touching a line, not completely touching two sides, but just touching a line, it scores the lower value of the two regions adjacent to that line. So if it's here and it's just barely touching this line between the 10 and the 15, it counts as a 10. As soon as it touches that line, it counts as the lower value. If a disc is lying flat on the board, the determining factor in deciding whether it is touching the line is whether the bottom edge of the disc is over any part of the line, not by where the edge of the disc appears to be when viewed from above. During an opponent's turn, a player may not touch the board, the table, or place a disc in position, or make any unusual noise or motion designed to distract the player. Aside from just ridiculousness and trying to distract your opponent, probably the most common thing that I see happen, and it's just completely out of not thinking about it, is a player will, while their opponent is shooting, they'll be getting ready for their shot and they'll wax their disc, which shakes the table a little bit and isn't completely fair. So to keep this rule super simple, what it is, you're not allowed to touch the board, you're not allowed to touch the table, nothing. You sit back, keep your hands to yourself, just like they teach you in kindergarten. Keep your hands to yourself and let your friend play the game. During a shot, only the player's shooting hand and associated wrist and forearm may touch the board or table. So just like you're not allowed to touch the board when your opponent's playing, the only thing that you're allowed to touch the board or the table with is your shooting hand. You can't have your hand here or on the table or help keep balance. Anything you do like that has to only be your shooting hand that touches the board or the table. Before shooting, a player must wait until all motion of the discs from the previous turn has ceased. Most common thing that happens here is that a button will spin like a top, and it can spin and spin. You're not allowed to take your shot until that motion has completely stopped, because it could alter how the discs interact when they hit each other on the board. So just wait until it's done moving before you take your shot. A disc must start from a flat, stationary position and be touching some part of the outer boundary line of the player's quadrant, or touching both the outer boundary line and the player's quadrant dividing line. So it's this shooting line that's in your quadrant right in front of you. The disc has to be touching that, and the outer extreme of how far you can go is you can go right over, as long as some part of your disc is touching both the shooting line and your divider line. So right here is legal, but as soon as it moves over, so it's not touching that divider line, it's not a valid shot. A disc must be struck with one or more fingers. No aids, such as finger guards, are permitted. The only exception is if you play in a Q-specific tournament or division of a tournament. Intentional or excessive shaking of the board with the shooting hand or by any other means is not permitted. No! We just want to keep that board as stable and still as possible. Once a player has his or her finger and disc in a set position in preparation for a shot, and the disc leaves his or her finger, a shot is judged to have taken place. Now what that means is, once you have the disc set in place, even if you accidentally flick it a little bit and it isn't the shot you meant to take, that still counts as a shot taken. The reason the rule is written the way it is, sometimes you grab the button and it might fall out of your hand as you go to set it in place. We're not going to count that, but once it's set, you're lined up, even a little bump will count as a shot taken. Neither the board nor the chair of any player may be moved while the game is in progress, except that a player may move his or her chair, if necessary, to pick up a disc that has fallen out of reach. Pretty straightforward, I think. When a player is shooting, at least a portion of his or her posterior must be in contact with the seat of his or her chair.
Seriously? Posterior? Are we playing with the Queen of England?
Okay, how about we call it the one cheek rule?
Sure, that works.
Each leg of a player's chair must be in contact with the floor. No leaning or tipping of the chair is permitted. No part of the player's body except the feet may touch the floor. No other means of support may be utilized. Granulated shuffleboard wax shall be placed in the ditch so that players may rub their discs in the wax prior to shooting. It may be applied to the playing surface by tournament officials and only by tournament officials if, in their opinion, conditions warrant it. No other lubricant is allowed.
No!
If time runs out, in a timed match, one additional shot will be allowed, if necessary, to equalize the number of shots. What that means is if we run out of time, and I've taken 6 shots, but you've only taken 5 when the buzzer goes, you are allowed to take one more shot to equalize the number of shots taken. If a disc touches or crosses the outer boundary line, it is out of play, subject to Rule 8E, which we'll cover in just a minute. If a disc is out of play, it shall be placed in the ditch before the next player's turn and must remain there until the end of the round. What that means is when the shot is done, if it is touching the outer boundary line, we're going to knock it into the ditch so that the next person, it's not going to disrupt the next shot or any following shots in that round. The spinning disc rule. If a disc touches or crosses the outer boundary line and does not strike anything other than the playing surface while touching or across the outer boundary line and returns under its own momentum to end up within the outer boundary line, it will be considered still in play. You may ask yourself 2 questions. 1, how on earth does this happen? Well, a couple things can happen. 1 is the disc can be spinning like a top and find itself going out over the line and then coming back in. The other thing that can happen is sometimes when it goes off a peg, it ends up spinning like that, and that can roll over the line and come back in. So if it goes out over and comes back, wherever it ends up will determine whether it remains in play or gets tossed in the ditch. Now your next question may be, why do they have this rule? And this is just my opinion, but I think they have the rule because where it ends up, we can't argue that. It either ends up inside or touching the line or outside. We can look at it and see exactly where it is. But we could potentially, if we were super competitive, argue about, oh no, that did cross the line, or yes it did, or no it didn't, back and forth. The other thing is that sometimes in like the World Championships, you'll call a referee over to settle if there is any kind of a dispute. Well, the referee doesn't know what happened. All they're going to know is what they see when they come there. So with this, it cuts down on any disputes or debates and makes it more black and white what the final call is. The damage stays rule. This can be your best friend or your worst enemy, depending on how the button bounces. If a disc touches or crosses the outer boundary line, strikes the backboard or any out-of-play discs, then re-enters the playing surface, the disc is out of play, but the altered position of any disc struck shall remain and any 20s made shall count, except for the out-of-play disc. Now here's what that means. A button shoots out of play, whether it doesn't matter what button it is. Any button that was in play shoots out of play and bounces back in. Whatever damage it causes will stay. But that button that was out of bounds is dead regardless. What happens though is it will move. Sometimes it will hit 1 or 2 or 3 buttons and it will move them around the board. But whatever the final lie is, that's how the game continues. And just like the spinning disc rule, I think the reason for that rule is it cuts down on disputes, because you and I could argue about where this button was before the damage hit it, but we can't really argue about where it sits now. And again, you call the referee over, the referee doesn't know what happened unless we enter like instant camera replay into the world of Crokinole. This is just the best, cleanest way to settle any damage that happens on the board. And again, it can be your best friend or your worst enemy. We really hope this helps, and maybe it can prevent you from getting so frustrated that you rip your hair out trying to understand these rules. Please keep in mind that these are the official NCA rules that will be used at NCA tournaments. So when you are playing at home, please adjust the rules to suit everyone at the table and make sure everyone is having as much fun as possible playing the greatest game on earth. Make it a great day. If a disc, see, that's why I call them buttons, because it's easier to say than discs. No, doesn't necessarily. No, let's do that again. And you, again, I'm not doing it wrong. Let's say you blow it. Again, let's say you blow it. Why can't this happen in tournament play? All right. Now let's start again. Now these, gotta keep rolling. Please keep this as to where it appears in. I gotta do that again. In a line, or whether. It's weird. This is the X. We're rolling again? Alright. Opponent's cell posterior. You don't need to worry about it, you just do what you're told. No, I didn't do that. In contact with his or her chair. Alright, let's do that over. Oh, alright. Let's wait to go. Or hit the button, then the post, and drop back for it. Fist bump, gotcha. That was a little fun. Alright. Line up the board. A little long-winded, but there it is.